for the fall of 2015. We're back on week 7. I don't even know how to describe this one. You know, you watch an old episode of, and Stevie likes this show, Hell on Wheels, and they do a good job of highlighting back in the day, back in the 1800s when the railroads were building across the country, that there were charlatans and snake oil salesmen that were running around trying to take people's money. The tie into real estate they give is they have people that are trying to have people buy land promising growth. But I really want to concentrate on the snake oil salespeople and the other stuff, because there's probably no area that's more rife with, I'll use this term very, very loosely, gurus who are absolute snake oil salespeople. And these gurus are typically oriented around authority, celebrity, being an expert, being a member of something to be an expert. And they all have the same thing in common. Not only are they full of it, in other words, what they're telling you is a complete fiction and lie, but they're very passionate about it. And what they rely on is the gullibility of the real estate industry, combined with the fact that we do no vetting or no proof to do this. It's exactly the same thing that the snake oil salespeople did in the 1800s, right? There was no social media back then. There was no proof. And so, you know, you tend to see certain things with these folks. They tend to do a lot of video. They tend to do a lot of endorsement work. They'll put up these little clips. They'll tend to have a very strong message that's delivered in such a way that it's passionate, like, oh my God, if this person believes this much, it must be true. And generally what we found is that directly related to how strong and passionate they are, I mean, there's even a guy that does coaching around a concept of the warrior thing, and he likes to swear. And he thinks the more he swears, the more he tells people to screw off and other things. This is not real estate. This is just in general. That
hey, I like to swear.
And he tries to command a whole bunch of stuff. But if you peel it back, other than the fact that he's figured out a formula to get people to pay him a lot of money, you never see any demonstrable results of those people that he gets there. He's got this black box. He's even calling his latest product a black box because he needs to take it to the world, not just the people that he can get into his seminar. Well, you can connect the dots here, right? Once you run through people that have a lot of disposable income that'll go sit in a room together, you don't have a business unless you've got, like in real estate, referrals and repeatability. In other words, this is a theme I want you to take away. If you don't really have anything, you can't fake it. You're just going to be seen as somebody who's either A, typical agent, or B, somebody who's a snake oil salesperson. Yeah, I don't trust him or her because I saw that they were positioning on social media as a celebrity, but then when I got into detail with them, I could tell they were just completely trying to wing it based on their personality or their passion or all of the things like that. So let's talk about what really matters. You know, what's interesting about the noise and nonsense is it's gotten proportionately worse with social media. In other words, the ability for the snake oil salespeople and the purveyors of crap to get their message out has gotten proportionally easier the more social media that's out there. The second and sister thing you heard us talk about is that it's gotten easier for them because of these groups. There's a group that's set up by a franchise. Agents used to be taught to set up self-IDX websites, right? You don't put your brokerage information up there. We still own one in St. Louis. It's called St. Louis Real Estate Today, not the Kevin and Stephanie Cottrell real estate team website. Well, the equivalent of this is these groups that are nothing other than stealth recruiting sites for franchises. And whether they tell you that they're wearing lab coats or they're anything else that they're doing, one of the things you're going to see is it is nothing but a ruse to identify agents for team leaders or brokers to go after and recruit them. So the information and the vetting and all the other stuff that they purportedly do is really not anything other than a ruse. So let's go to what's important out there. First thing you probably would want to understand if you're in real estate, just like you would in any other industry, is what really matters to your clients. I'm a financial planner. I want to know how people pick a financial planner. If I'm a surgeon, I want to understand how am I, based on my reputation, my track record, my performance, going to get business? Well, surgeons get business by referral. So do lawyers. So lawyers also have to advertise their services. But you'll start to see some continuity here. But let's first talk about real estate specifically, and we'll tie it into other industries. Let's go first to the home buying side of things. 88%. That's a pretty high number. It means the vast majority of agents, and that difference between 88% and 100 has to do with unrepresented buyers that buy directly from a builder or from a for sale by owner or some other unusual familial contract that, you know, they buy a house from their dad or some other family member. So it's certainly 12% is a pretty small number. So the presumption on the buy side is everybody's going to use an agent. Now what you find is interesting is exactly diametrically opposite with all these companies that think they're going to disintermediate the agent. That number since 2001 is up. It used to be 69%. Now it's 88%. So for anybody that's hawking the fear of, you need to do this, you need to be a celebrity agent, or you need to be, you know, the local personality, or you're not going to get used by buyers. Certainly it's not true. More and more buyers are using agents. Why is this the case? I'm going to always tie these down. I'm not going to tell you the numbers and not give you the context. The reason it doesn't work to try and cut the agent out of the loop on the buy side is in high velocity markets that are tipped in the favor of sellers, unrepresented buyers lose every time. If there's 20 offers and a property sells the first day it's on the market, you have no hope or a prayer of buying without having an agent. You may not even succeed in the first 5, 6, 7, 10 rounds if you have the wrong agent, but you certainly need an agent. More markets are tilted that way than the opposite way. And as a result, since 2001, we've gone through a couple of restructurings. When we had the housing debacle, we went through a whole financial debacle where a lot fewer buyers could get loans. So there's a perception, along with the velocity, that I need representation, and certainly the number at 88% confirms that. Here's the real interesting one. Home buyers don't pick authorities. They don't pick celebrities. They don't go out and do this. So 40% found their agent they work with on the buy side from a friend or family member. You could also put neighbors in there. And 12% use the same agent they used previously. We'll talk about repeat versus first-time buyers in a second. So those of you that are quick and astute mathematicians can realize that more than half of the buyers came from a single source, if you want to loop it together. They either already know the agent because they work with them, or they got a family member, a friend, coworker, or a neighbor that gave them a referral. So that should probably start to tell you that you can't succeed at a high level in this business if you absolutely screw up the repeat and referral business. You've missed half of the business. It's like telling a financial planner, piss off every other person that comes into the office and do a terrible job, and then let's talk about how good your business is. Meanwhile, your competitor across the street is going to convert the majority of the repeat referral business. Yet agents do this all the time. As we'll talk about today, they don't put people in the database. They do hundreds and hundreds of transactions, or they're in the business for 15 or 20 years. And you ask them about their clients and past clients, and it's at like 400. You can't win if you throw away 52% of where people pick the agent they're going to work with. You cannot. Just put a star there. Go back and say, am I any good at this? Agents that do well, that are perceived to be heavy prospecting agents, that are perceived to be prospectors and they must be doing something different, always do this well. You know, Steph and I are very attuned to this because we did this poorly, but we did it in such a massive size that it wasn't so much the buy versus the sell side, but just the amount of database. I want to kind of show you what the difference is for an agent that's been in the market for 15 years and doesn't do a good job of adding to their database. And I've got 350 or 400 people in their database. I went into St. Louis, I didn't know anybody. I went on a massive potential client acquisition, potential referral source, potential future client push. Because I didn't know anybody. What else was I going to do? I actually went to work and did this. When we left the market in less than 4 years, I had 1,200 and 1,300 people or more in the database. In 4 years. And we did a horrible job of converting it. That's why we're passionate about this. But I would tell you, if you don't start with the acquisition of the information, you can't follow up on it, right? If you're sitting there, you can't go back and change the past. If you're sitting there and you've been in the business 10 years and you got 300 people in your database, don't beat yourself up. Just start changing the past. Because you're not emulating what other people do in other industries. And 52% of the people on the buy side, we'll talk about the sell side in a minute, gonna pick a referral repeat agent. Here's the good news. 2/3, 67% of the buy side, only interview one agent. Why does this matter? If you're that agent they know, and they forget about the agent that they were getting a postcard every 18 months randomly that happens to live in their neighborhood, when they can save up enough money to do it, you become that agent. In other words, 67% of the time, they only interview one agent. We need to make sure we're that agent. We'll talk a little bit today about how you demonstrate that concept of authority or expertise, much like a financial planner or a surgeon or a lawyer would do. It's a huge part of their business. When you look at repeat and referrals, when buyers are surveyed at the end of the transaction, and here's where you can see that the failure rate is there. Remember, my number was 52% is the actuality, when they actually measure how they pick their agent on the buy side. Look at this number. 88% are positively disposed to work with a buyer agent again. The reality is, if it's a 52% actual and 88% at the time of the transaction, well, how did you get from 88 to 52? Well, you never put it in the database and you never followed up with them. End of story. It's not going to be any different when we talk about the sell side. So your takeaway here is, how badly am I throwing business away so that somebody can run into somebody at the grocery store with a name badge, and then I get upset when I see the sign in the yard for somebody I sold a house to? You have nobody to blame but yourself. Starts out at 88%, and if you do a great job, it may even be higher than that. You end up at 52% actual. So the good news is, this is all found business, right? Your conversion rate and your repeat rate should be extremely high. We'll talk about how to do this. You can see the messaging here is very, very different than the nonsense you'll see out there by the snake oil salespeople. Snake oil salespeople are going to tell you to be enthusiastic, build a brand, do all this stuff on social media, and just wow people with your personality. That's not what the data says from the National Association of Realtors. If you're a professional and you do a decent job, and you remember, this is the overall number, right? You know from being in real estate how bad, on average, many of the agents are. And it's still 88%. Your number should be close to 100% or 98%. You should rarely have somebody that comes out of the transaction buy side or sell side that doesn't say, I'll absolutely work with them again. And then it's your business to lose at that point. We'll go through the sell side fairly quickly. The numbers are about the same, right? You get the percentages are roughly the same. I'm going to go through the second bullet and spend more time on it. Sellers don't pick authorities either. It's even higher at 60%. Friend, family member, or neighbor. We're at 52% on the buy side, and we can talk a little bit about sell versus buy side. The reason the buy side is lower and it's not as high as 60%, because people are anchored to a home. They've already bought it. They live there. They got their ecosystem, and they tend to have people that they know from the neighborhood or otherwise that they can ask a question about, or they see a sign go up in their neighborhood yard. Buy side, you've got the additional sources where people can run into a potential buyer. Open houses, people call off of a yard sign, other things like that, where it tends to dilute it down from 60%. So the good news is on the sell side, it's 60%. Again, can you build a sustainable, fantastic business if you screw up 60%? 6 out of 10 potential transactions you throw away because you're focused on building social media branding. And you're running around with all this snake oil nonsense. And you're still throwing away 6 out of 10 transactions. It just sounds ludicrous when I say it like that, but that's what you see out there. Now, I'll talk a little bit about why agents don't do this, because if you're not doing any business and you have no production, what we're going to suggest that you do, you can't do. So in other words, one of the ways you defeat the nonsense of this social media fiction is you warn clients about what they're going to observe out there and tell them what questions to ask, right? If I'm the celebrity agent for Beverly Hills and I've done 0 transactions in the last 6 months, but boy, I have a fantastic social media presence. And I'm in all sorts of videos at all sorts of landmarks along Rodeo Drive. Just ask them. How many transactions do each agent you interview do? Don't go after an agent by name, but just describe the behavior. And warn them that there are agents out there that spend all their time on social media that don't actually do any real estate. When was the last time you saw a surgeon, a financial planner, a lawyer, or another professional doing this authority social media branding? They don't do it because it's not how clients choose to work with professionals. Let the snake oil salespeople sell it to the people who want to spend $50,000 for an endorsement. They're gullible, right? The faster you get them to spend money on that stuff, the more wound around the axle they are on things that don't matter. And even if they're doing transactions, it's not profitable. They're starting a $50,000 hole that you're not in. So don't get caught up in the social media and the authorities because it just doesn't matter. That's not how people, this is the NAR data. 60% of the time, they're not looking at social proof. They're not looking at authority or celebrity reputation. How do we know this? 70% of the time, they only contact one agent. 7 out of 10 times, they'll have no competition. How do you get a tough way to build a business? You screw up 6 out of 10 transactions because you don't maintain your database. This is the tough way to do the business. You have to recreate new business all the time because you got tired of maintaining your database and following up and proving to them that you're continuing to do a good job in the business. So instead of 70% of the time, you have no competition. You go after 100% opportunities and expireds, canceled withdrawals, and for sale to owners. I can tell you that number is not 70% when they go to list. It's probably 10% of the time they only interview one agent. Maybe it's 5%. So would you rather have competition the majority of the time or not the majority of the time? Remember, we're talking 6 out of 10 potential transactions. The better job over time, the easier your business gets. This is why when you look around, you get beyond the noise in the market centers and the offices. This would be an agent that's been around, and he or she's been around 7, 10, 12 years. They're not in the meetings. They're not conducting trainings if they're in a big market center. They're just doing consistent production. You look at it and go, yeah, I don't know how John or Susan does 75, 100 transactions. They don't have a big team. They're mostly listing focused, and they just seem to have business just fall out of the sky. This is the 2 pieces you're missing. They're very good at this. You're out there competing on the majority of your transactions. They're not. So the reality is you got to do both. It's not an either or. It's not like one's better than the other, but 100% of the time you cannot succeed if you screw up 6 out of 10 of your potential transactions. You will have a very difficult time replacing those from other sources. I mean, it should just make sense, right? If I try and build the same amount of production, let's say hypothetically I had 600 people in a good database, I proved my production, I've been staying in touch with them on a regular basis, they believe that I'm credible. Remember, it starts out at 88%. And I don't decimate that down to some low number. And I compare that to a brand new agent that doesn't have a database that's going to go after expireds. Even if he was coming out of sales, he was fantastic on the phone, he could get appointments, and there were enough expireds or for sale by owners to go after. You're going to crush them every time with a foundation of a business that doesn't ignore the reality of the market. He or she can't create some social media presence, authority, some snake oil strategy to make them the local expert, right? They've got 50 videos up, walking around showing the landmarks and talking about it, standing in front of monument sites. Because at the end of the day, people are not interviewing, in 7 out of 10 cases, more than one agent. So you might have all these videos and all this stuff up. If they don't know about you, they're not going to call you. They're certainly not going to call you because you have this video, because people are starting to realize that some of this stuff is a little hokey. Some of this stuff is lacking credibility. Those of you that have been through listing mastery would know what the reality is of going after certain sources of business. Yet you have some of these snake oil salespeople coming up with, here's my secret strategy on how to do this and earn, $250,000, $500,000, whatever their number is. And the numbers that they come up with are ridiculous. They don't agree with what we have on these charts. And two, for any of you that have gone after a particular source of business, for sale by owner would be one, they're so ludicrous that it should ruin the credibility, but it doesn't because agents are gullible, of everything that ever comes out of their mouth. In other words, if they're absolutely fabricating nonsense on their strategy, for example, to go after for sale by owners, the ratios are ridiculous. It would never make any sense. You've called it enough FSBOs to go, well, my market must be different. No, they're lying. You should assume everything else comes from their program as pure fiction and lying. It's a shame that agents do such a poor job at this. The good news is we know what the stats are. The National Association of Realtors does the surveying. And 70% of the time, if you get your referral or repeat, you're not going to be competing with another agent. On the sell side, it's slightly lower than the buy side. We're at 88%. Now we're talking 83%. It's still your business to lose after you've had a successful transaction. Again, this is the average. If you're running a high-performance business where you're doing a great job of servicing your sellers, the listings are selling, you're going to be higher than that 83%. If you have slippage where your number is way below that, buy side or sell side, you need to look at it. If you're in coaching with us, let's look at why are you not getting that repeat business. It's usually for one of two reasons. You're not following up. You never put it in a database to follow up on it, right? You just threw it away. Or you're doing something in the servicing. You're doing something with your transactions to cause people to not want to work with you again. Because the stats say 88% on the buy side, 83% on the sell side. Those are high numbers. That's how financial planners and other professionals build their business. They don't go out and get a brand new book of business every year. They do a ratio of, like, in the high 80s of repeat business. They have very few clients, typically less than 20%, that don't do repetitive transactions with them. Otherwise, they don't build a good business. So let's also look on some of the other stuff that is being touted out there to distract agents by snake oil salespeople. Stephanie's favorite, the millennials, the first-time buyers, these young buyers. And you got all sorts of gurus on social media that would like to tell you that this is a great source of business and chase it. You need to be on social media to do this. Well, here's the reality. 33% of the transactions were first-time buyers. Here's your problem. It's down from 40%. It's going the wrong way. The stats do not agree with what the snake oil salespeople are pushing. Just because that technology company tells you need to have all this stuff online, first of all, you're not going to build a healthy business that's overweight on the buy side. But the reality is this. Millennials don't want to own a car, let alone a house. And that's why Uber and other services are doing so well. It is a responsibility in a generation that basically takes no accountability or responsibility for anything. Combine that with tougher underwriting, and you've got a recipe for a number that went from 40% to 33%. How good is your investment in this snake oil products and your emphasis on social media going to be if you're trying to build a play on millennials if that number goes from 33% to 25% next? Or even if it stays at 33%, you're the wrong way on the business. So don't get confused with that. Let's look at the real demographics, right? The buy side, 31-year-old first-time buyers on average. Repeat buyer, 53. 65% of recent home buyers are married couples. They're not millennials. So the millennials don't make it through the filter on the declining number of first-time buyers or the demographics of the buyers. Think about your areas that you target and don't get confused by the nonsense of the snake oil salespeople. They ignore the data that the association collects. Agents ignore the reality of what's going on. Now, of course, you can come up with some examples where you could probably find some real small micro market that might be bucking this trend. But you're not going to build a healthy business over time. There will be an agent in your market that is riding the wave, selling people homes in their 30s. They've got a whole set of them that are in their 50s. They're moving up, moving down, moving aside. I'll talk a little bit about what the data tells us about that in a second. And their typical client is a married couple. Doesn't mean you can't work with people that are single, but just realize that is not what the data says about who's out there completing real estate transactions. Now here's one that will be specific to some markets, but in general, what you see, 40% of home sellers went up to a larger house. Why? They're having kids, they're bringing in other generations of the family, their mother-in-law has to come stay with them. Something's going on that's driving them to get to a bigger house. And that's the difference between a 31-year-old and a 53-year-old. 47% bought a more expensive home, and 53% went into a newer home. So you got three trends there that you should be paying attention to. Demographically, where are people in your area moving? I can tell you in St. Louis, South St. Louis into Webster Groves was a trend. You could see the people doing it. They buy a house, their first house over there, they jump way up to a bigger house, they move into Webster, and then they do a second move within Webster. I could tell you in my market where the trends that confirm this were. We find that agents are clueless about what's going on in the market. If there's new construction in your market, where are the people coming from that are buying? Might it be worth your while to go start to spend some time with the new home salespeople while you preview the listings? Because people are buying 53% of the time a newer home or new construction. And find out where people are moving from. Find out what's going on in your market so you can actually target areas. We get so hung up in the arbitrary, oh, I'm going to be the expert in this neighborhood or this area. But you're not paying attention to what's really going on in your market. Now, this stuff can shift over time, right? The size of the demographic pool can shift. But currently, 65% married couples. And you've got these high percentages. More expensive homes, newer homes going on. Now, here's the big one that is catching agents. Here's the big one that you'll see me be very passionate about. Most of the snake oil salespeople are not being candid about the fundamental change. There's a CEO that does an annual event where he does his speech and he gives his vision about what's going on, and he's not telling his tens of thousands of agents the truth. The velocity in the market has shifted downward. NAR has called it out. Typical seller was in a home back in 2007 for 6 years. That number was basically down from about 7 or 8 years in the early 2000s. Why did that happen? Because of easy financing. People could very quickly turn over homes. Prices were moving up and houses were turning over. Here's the reality. It just went to 10 years. Those of you that are mathematicians that have been around long enough, that crushes, on average, your turnover rate. Unless you go back to the previous bullet point and you know where people are typically getting in, getting their foothold in the housing market, and they're moving up to something bigger, something newer, or something more expensive. Understand your market, and you can overcome this. Ignore the velocity, and you end up calling into a neighborhood that's got a 2% turnover rate. People are going to come out of there in a pine box. And 10 years is probably low for those neighborhoods. Yeah. And you'll have, don't be confused, that you'll have agents that have blue or gray hair that have been in the market for 30 years or 35 years that are still working, that get the majority of the business in that neighborhood because they've been farming it for 17 years. They've been farming it for 27 years. They know everybody in town because Dottie's been around for generations, and people have, from grandkids on up, know her. Those are not good markets to tolerate, to go after and target. So what matters? What do people look at to be experts, right? We're starting out with, you know, in the 80%, people want to do business with you again. We also need to look at people who have not met you, that you're trying to cultivate for future business. Well, if people are starting the process and you identify them, we have two challenges. One, we want to build our database. Two, we need to identify opportunities and cultivate and separate ourselves. Because what we're looking to do is we're looking to interrupt the process. I'll talk about that later today. But we have to interrupt the process by which, even if agents are poor at follow-up, that number, remember, only drops from 88 or 82% down into the 60% or 52% sell versus buy side, respectively. Even if they're terrible, on average, people are going to call them. They're still going to get referrals. Why does that happen? I want to talk a little bit about this before I get into the market expertise. It happens because agents are all seen as a commodity, right? You have a bad day at the doctor's office and you have to have surgery on your spine. You're not going to just go, well, can somebody tell me a good spine surgeon? Your general practitioner is going to potentially give you a referral. Same thing with financial planners. Real estate is its own unique animal. So we have to start to demonstrate and look different. This last, I don't know, it was about a week ago, it was the first of the month, and I always chuckle when I get the same newsletter from 32 different agents with exactly the same subject line. Now imagine your clients are getting that nonsense. You can't be doing things that are in the box and make you look just like the rest of the herd. Financial planners don't do this. Surgeons don't do this. You walk in and ask a surgeon, tell me about this neck surgery and this procedure. I've done this 1,700 times in the last 3 years. The guy that took Stephanie's gallbladder out said that I've done this like 17,000 times or something. I mean, he does it like 5 times a day on surgery day. That's a demonstrated record. In real estate, it's a unique universe where our opportunity is to disrupt that process. The more people that know you, they get to learn that you're different, the better you're going to be. What do they pay attention to? It's not celebrity. It's not quote-unquote authority. It's market expertise. People are continuously, especially their homeowners, curious about what's going on in the market. Just simply repeating sound bites. Just having this image and this persona. It's great for a Bravo TV show to be $1 million agent in Malibu. There's 1 million agents in the country. What do the other 999,000 some odd agents do? Don't try and replicate some snake oil fictitious strategy. It's all about fundamentals. Think like a financial planner or another professional. It's based on knowledge, track record. At the end of the day, even though people don't typically interview more than one agent, the more people we can get into the mix that we've identified that are potential transactions, or they will know somebody. Remember, it's repeat and referral. And if you look at the percentages, when you go back and watch the replay of this, it's a huge relationship. The vast majority is referral. A much smaller number is repeat, right? You start out at 88%, and yet you got like 12 or 14% of the people actually repeat. Why does that happen? It happens because of the commodity of a real estate agent and the easy dislodging that occurs, right? You can, not only can you not follow up to ensure that you're not going to get business, but if you're seen as a interchangeable resource, you can either plug yourself in, like we're going to talk about, or you get unplugged pretty easy. So that's a good news and a bad news. If you don't identify opportunities and do a good job of demonstrating that you're an expert by understanding market conditions, by proving your production, by doing some of the other things we're doing, you'll have no hope of getting the business. For sure, if all you do is email and text and you never get in a relationship, especially if you never get face-to-face with somebody, your conversion rate is going to be much lower than somebody who actually has a relationship with that person. The person with the best odds, is the agent that did business with them last time. The next best person is the person who identified the opportunity, proved they were a market expert based on their market information they put out, got in front of them, and demonstrated their track record. In the financial planning world, they're required to disclose accurately their information. In real estate, there's no requirement like that. One of the ways you do it is proof of production. We talk about this. Those of you that are in coaching with us, the vast majority of you have already implemented this and seen benefits of it. The last sliver of getting the highest conversion is having a face-to-face relationship. Doesn't mean waiting until you do the listing appointment, but getting in front of people. Because now you're a differentiated person. Maybe the agent, and he or she was a real knucklehead, but despite that, there's an 88% chance that they'll use them again, and that agent never follows up with them. You can dislodge that relationship easy. Now, if you're competing with somebody who's got 10, 12% market share, real strong, dominant player, you're not going to be able to dislodge them. The good news for you and the takeaway for you is this is an easy link to break, right? These people don't have accounts with a financial planner for their house in the real estate business. All you have to do is identify them. So a couple things here. You can't do this in an automated way. This is a relationship-based business. Edward Jones teaches their reps. It is built one person at a time, one conversation at a time, and best when done face-to-face. You go into their office in their training center in St. Louis, and I did, and they've got doors and doorways set up, both commercial and residential, but they train them on how to door knock, train them in body language and sales and presentations. They have kitchen tables for them to present at. Yet in real estate, we think we got a whole different set of rules. Nowhere in there did you hear me say that Edward Jones is teaching their people how to become the celebrity financial planner, the authority, and do a whole bunch on social media. In fact, most of those companies prohibit them from doing anything on social media. Now, it doesn't prevent them from doing something personally, like posting their kids playing soccer. But this ties into the next bullet point. As hard as it is, and almost everybody's guilty of this, you really need to be careful about what you do on social media because it'll be used against you. You don't realize that some client that you had an excellent relationship with sees you post some stuff that doesn't agree with them, and they're not going to necessarily come on and make comments to you. But again, remember the stats. It's close to 50% of the time. In other words, 5 out of 10 of the potential transactions come from somebody that they know, not them. Not only are you going to not get their business, you're not going to get the people, the coworkers, the church members, the others, because you're posting stuff, trying to look like an idiot as an authority or celebrity, or something that is your opinion that you put out on social media. So our strongest caution is to go dark. You want to be a lurker, you want to comment every once in a while, stop posting things that are controversial on social media.
Can you be more specific? Can you give us a good example? Because I can think of some of my clients that are passionate about the Constitution or passionate about the Second Amendment or passionate. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think that kind of stuff should be posted. And you'll see some people, if they do choose to put something out there, they'll do it and they'll make no comment at all, which is sort of the best of the worst options. In other words, something happens and it's news and they share the news. It's when you start to make an opinion or you start to show up in the comments and you start to fight with people online and be very, very, very emotional and not professional about it. And so when you look at this, the easiest way, because people have a hard time controlling themselves, is to just stay away from it. You can be on there, you could share things that are newsworthy, but what we have to realize is in America today, nobody agrees with anything. And everybody gets hurt based on what they see posted on social media. So if we told you, yeah, you can post on social media, but the likelihood is you're going to take your database of 500 people and piss off at least half of them if they're on there with you. And that's going to be potentially 5 out of 10 of your transactions. And the repeat and the referral, and it's 60% of your sell side business. So do you want to do that and potentially risk 60% of your sell side business? Even if they don't say anything, and most of them won't, they'll just lightly step away from you. If you're a fan of the Constitution, you like the Second Amendment, or you do this, or you love Hillary Clinton, it doesn't matter what it is. If you make a stand and a statement, you might as well just light fire your database. Because the way social media is, if somebody comments on it, here's your real risk. Their 5,000 Facebook friends now see what you stand for, and I live in your neighborhood, I'm not calling you. I've already made my decision on it. So really focus on, if you're going to do something on social media, there are some strategies to build a community, group or web page, get information out about what's going on in the community or otherwise, if you choose to do that. We don't necessarily think that that's the best use of time. Now, some people have virtual assistants and others that help them with it, but personal views off of it is going to be your best bet.
Yeah.
Talk about how other industries work. I'm not going to spend a lot more time on this. The past performance, whether it's healthcare, it's surgeons and law, it all is based on referrals and outcome. How good are you in court if you're a lawyer? How good are you as a surgeon? What's the disposition of all the people you work with? In real estate, because of the numbers you see from the National Association of Realtors, they're not doing competitive interviewing. They're as bad as the average realtor is, they're still positively predisposed. What we're trying to do is we're trying to drive a wedge in the fact that agents are terrible at this. Agents are buying the social media nonsense. They're getting distracted with it. They're doing things that they shouldn't be doing. Don't follow the herd. Be the person who's not doing what they're doing. Build your database. Be purposeful about it. Remember when I went from 0 to 12 or 1,300 people? They were all people that started out with somebody that I had never met before, and I cultivated. We did a horrible job at the cultivation. Yet we got a ton of referrals and repeat business. Oh, I can only imagine how much faster our business would have grown if we'd done a better job of that. So that's when you should put a star by. Performance matters. Financial planners with poor performance, surgeons that have bad results, patients dying or other issues, they're going to get out of the business. They're going to get driven out. Your only way to drive realtors out of the business is to take their business away from them. And the way you do that is by disrupting the referral and the repeat, not building a social media presence. I'll repeat it again. The more people you identify, get into contact with, prove that you're different, prove that you're an expert, prove that you're a professional, and continue to do that over time, the more you dislodge that, and the more appointments you'll go on where there's no competition. They likely won't call that agent and never follow with them after they sold in the house on the buy side, because you learned that they're planning on selling in the spring. And now you've proved through production, you've had several conversations with them, you maybe popped by and you met them at the door because you had another appointment in the neighborhood, and now they're ready to sell. They're likely to not, you've broken the chain, the weak chain. Even though it's high percentages, the weak chain of repeat is at 12% because of how often it's broken. I'm going to say that again. Even though those numbers, and I told you can't have a successful business for you over time, this is why agents don't have successful businesses, because some other agent broke that chain. You know, the 52 or the 60% overall. Remember the small number out of the big number. The 40% plus number is referral, excuse me. The small, barely into the double digits, 10, 12, 14%, is repeat. Why is it starting out at 88% and ending up at 12? Because there are agents in your marketplace, and this is a game where there's a certain number of transactions. If you don't go after it, somebody else will, including your clients. So I'm not even talking about just doing a good job with the database. You need to be thinking about this with the proper framework. If you do not go after their business by talking to more people, by meeting with more people, by having more conversations, it's the Edward Jones model. The more people I meet with, the more people I talk with, the more people in my database, the better I will do. End of story. you can easily keep that number down 10, 12% or lower on repeat with other agents. They're not even going to call them. If I sold you the house and I haven't been in touch with you for 7, 8, 9 years, they're not going to call them. That's how you dislodge that business. It's all about interrupting the cycle. And yet agents act like, oh, well, in my market, I'm going to, do an open house, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to spend time on trying to, build business on social media, and I'm going to do this and that, and then I'm ignoring and walking over and throwing away all of the core business because they don't build their database, right? Everything's disposable, right? You met 10 people at your open houses in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and none of them end up in the database. So don't be that agent that does that. The pillars of business need to match, and let's talk about interrupting the process. Pillars of business need to match the market. If your market has for sale by owners, you can't win. Number one, we already beat the thing with the database and repeat business with your past clients, but you can't win if you ignore ripe fruit. Don't buy into the ridiculous numbers that the snake oil salespeople tell you can convert, for example, in for sale by owners or expired and cancels, if they're not available in your market. But if they're there, if you're in coaching with us, we can talk to you about what reasonable conversion rates are. But people that have raised their hand and put a sign in the yard and said, I'm selling my house, how would you possibly think out of the transactions that are going to occur in your marketplace that you should not be in front of them? Don't give yourself a pass that says, oh, I don't like them. They're upset with, they're mean, they're difficult to deal with. Okay. How many of those $10,000 checks do you want to walk over? But don't buy into the snake oil people that tell you you can convert ridiculous percentages of them. Because then you're going to, in your mind, say, there's no way this will work. I'm doing something wrong. I'm not converting at the rate they're telling you. Remember, they're lying about what the reality is. Just like the people, for example, if you're a high turnover seller's market with very few expired and cancels, they're going to, if you go to a training on expireds that it mismatches your market, you're not going to have the same kind of success and you'll get frustrated. But don't miss those pillars if they're there. That, along with the database, makes for a healthy business and for repeat and referrals. Seasonal appropriate messaging. Agents act like the same thing should happen all year long. Go back and listen to the episode we did on seasonality. Despite the fact that you've got a whiz-bang, polished up, let me send you our white paper on why to be on the market over the holidays. All you're doing is pissing people off. If the easier question to ask them was, if you were in contract next week, would you even be in a position to move in early to mid-January? No, we couldn't even do that. We're going to be in Europe for all of January. Okay, well then don't send them the seasonal report on why to be on the market. All you do is irritate and piss people off. You can likely double your business by changing your messaging and asking better questions and taking advantage of seasonal activity. Go back and listen to the episode we did a couple weeks ago where you're focused on getting the right message. Because again, especially this time of year, we're in the fourth quarter, you're going to be in heavy identification mode. Not as many people are going to be coming on the market as they are in the spring. In the spring, you should be taking listings left and right, like we talked about last week. So how do you interrupt the process? The biggest database and the network wins. This has to do with sharks and advocates and people that you've met. Throw them away. Don't cultivate them. You're going to succeed in failing, not succeed. There'll be some agent that's building a database like I did in St. Louis where I'm doing a good job of putting them in the database, doing a terrible job of cultivating them. I still beat people. I ended up number 4 with our team out of 8,000 agents. Biggest database and network was a big part of that. As was maximizing, like we talked about, the Edward Jones piece. Massive amount of conversations. Get in front of as many people as possible that are qualified and build your network. Who can send you business? The last one was the piece that most people didn't really understand, and we've talked about before, and those of you that have been in Listing Mastery and other courses have talked about this market knowledge proof of production. I could tell you down to the 10th level everything that was going on in the market. So it doesn't matter if I've never met you before, or you just happen to ask me a question at the grocery store or at the gas pump. I could answer the question in such a way that I wasn't part of the herd. I wasn't just reciting something. Remember, some of the Seiko salespeople will tell you, just go buy broker metrics. Go buy this report. Take the report from your MLS. Again, if you don't understand what's going on in your market, you're not really adding any value. You're just like the rest of the herd that's out there. So be very, very careful about what you do and how you go after it. So, Stephanie, you've been pretty quiet today. Anything else you want to add?
No, you were on a great roll. No, you did. No, I don't.
Okay. I don't know if you want to look and see if there's any questions. I think we're all but done. We ended a little bit earlier than we normally do. We got like 5 minutes earlier. Go back and listen to this again. I'll listen to it a couple of times. We cringe when we hear people that do a lot of transactions per year and their database is small, or they've been in the business a long time and their database is small. It's a huge opportunity, but it also makes us realize that you're throwing away